If you've ever been involved with a narcissist, the effects might still be controlling your life, even if you don't realize it. I'm Cameron, and welcome back to Shit Creek Survivors, where we share real stories of getting stuck up Shit Creek, the paddles we use to get out, and motivation for those still stuck in their own Shit Creek right now. Today, we're going to tackle a topic that affects millions but is rarely discussed openly: narcissistic abuse. Our guest is Allie Treen, and she's a survivor of narcissistic abuse. Allie grew up with a covert narcissistic mother and has spent years untangling the manipulation, the self-doubt, and the emotional trauma that followed her into adulthood. In this episode, we're going to cover what narcissism really is and the different types, how narcissistic parents, partners, or friends manipulate reality and erode self-trust, the long-term effects on identity, emotional health, and PTSD, and strategies for healing, including gray rocking, somatic therapy, and self-love. If you've ever felt confused by a loved one's actions, struggled with toxic relationship, or wondered why certain patterns keep repeating in your life, this conversation will provide insight and hope. Let's dive in. Allie, thank you so much for being with us today in Shit Creek. If you would, tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us a little bit about your Shit Creek.
Yeah, it's really great to be here. I have never told my story like all in one place, so we'll see how it comes out. I'm Allie. I'm a somatic coach. I help women to connect with their emotions and feelings, and I'm also a podcaster. And I talk a little bit about my history of narcissistic abuse and being raised by a narcissist, and that is definitely my shit creek.
I bet. I
Yeah.
bet. And I don't think a lot of people even understand what that means or what that entails. So you'll have to tell us about kind of how that affected you growing up.
Yeah, I think when I think about like the way that it affected me for many, many years, the stories I would tell were the things done to me. And I
Mm,
realized that the more I talked about what was done to me, the more I was focusing on her. So my mother was the narcissist. But the more I focused
got
on
it.
her, the less I focused on myself, the less I knew myself, the more I lost
Mm,
myself, the more I hated myself.
right.
So I try to talk about it now in the context of like how I dealt with it. But I
Hmm.
do think it's probably worth me saying a little bit about what narcissism is. I don't know if your listeners know.
Yes, please. Yeah, yes,
Okay.
please.
So there's a lot of different types of narcissism. So there's people who are more grandiose, more charming, and sort of like lure you in. Like there's this recruitment period where they're all nice and they love you, and then they sort of turn on you. There's, covert narcissists, which is what my mother would be defined as, where they're sort of more like vulnerable, kind of always the victim. They kind of draw you
Okay.
in by you feeling sorry for them. So there's lots
Yeah.
of different types of narcissism, but all narcissists have a coercive and controlling nature. So that
Okay.
means that they will try to control kind of like everything in their environment.
Got
So
it.
that could be you, that could be a school teacher they're not getting along with, that could be somebody on the road who's not driving the way that they want them to drive. It could be
Hmm.
anything, but ultimately what's at the heart of all of it is that they have really low self-esteem and they
Okay.
can't really handle that reality, so they sort of project that out onto the world. So if you've ever heard of
Okay.
somebody who's like really has a hard time making friends and they might
Hmm.
make statements about like, oh, well, people never understand me. Oh, well, blah, blah, blah. And they sort of like then perpetuate that. The reason people don't understand them is because they're always trying to be so mysterious and weird and,
Right.
and special. So they sort of like will have these projections of like what the world thinks about them, but they end up living up to those projections. That's sort of why people think that. So it's sort of like a
Right.
self-fulfilling prophecy that
Yeah.
they do a lot. And they can control really small things to really big things, but ultimately, sort of the reason that happens is because they're viewing everything from their own perspective. They don't really
Mm,
think about how something's landing with you. If I'm a
right.
narcissist, I'm just saying what I want to say, how I want to say it. If I'm going out to dinner with you, I'm going to the place I want to go to. I'm not going to consider that you want to go somewhere else. If
Right.
you say I hurt your feelings, I'm going to be offended by that because I'm great. I can't afford to be somebody who would
Right.
hurt your feelings. So I'm going to do whatever I can to sort of erase that and say, well, if I did, it's probably because you sort of asked for it in a way. So it's
Right.
this like very hard to describe system of breaking you down, getting you to not trust your reality, and making you feel really small. And many narcissists, I think almost all narcissists, are also really sort of like volatile. So you
Hmm.
could have a normal conversation and all of a sudden there's a problem and it's an argument and you sort of, there's no indication that it was going there. And they will
Hmm.
all of a sudden just flip into like a narcissistic rage. So it becomes really, really difficult. And people in relationships, and I'll speak from my own perspective, I, in my relationship with my mother, had to make myself smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller,
Mm.
more subservient, more like, okay, I'll do what you want, more like treading on eggshells, right?
Yeah.
And in service of the relationship, trying to make it work, which is what most people do. They try to make it work. The
Yeah.
problem is when you challenge a narcissist, it's a problem for them, so they will lash out. But if you give them an inch, they will also take a mile. So if you back down, then they'll stomp you down
Uh,
harder because they know they can get you to go this far. Maybe they can get you to go farther. So
yeah.
there's really no way of having a real relationship with somebody who's narcissistic.
Yeah. And I can imagine how confusing that could be. First off, in a relationship, b- but even more confusing when it's your mom, because you're taking cues as a child of how do I live as a person? You know what
Hmm.
I mean? And it must be very confusing when that happens, because I've even been in conversations where I've started to doubt if I believe what I'm saying, because I'm so convinced at the whatever shape they're putting this pile of doo-doo in. You know what I mean? I'm like, "Am I wrong?" You know? And so you
Oh,
almost, like,
yeah.
question yourself.
Oh, yeah. I
So
mean,
that
there's
must.
things that, like, when I was a kid that I remember being told that I had a really bad memory and she had a really good memory. This is just like one
Mm,
tiny thing, right? But you're
yeah.
told she would tell me things over and over and over again. And so they sort of just like absorbed them. And
Yeah.
so, today I'm 33 years old now, but I still have things where I'll go like, oh, that's because I'm like that. And then I'll be like, wait a minute, am I actually like that? Or did I just like
Right.
absorb that kind of bullshit for so long that I thought that was
Right.
true? Like one of the big things that narcissists will say and that she would say a lot is that she's an empath. So somebody who like feels really strongly, who like supports other people's feelings, really like cares about others. And
Uh,
everybody just believed that because she would say that.
yeah.
And that's sort of like a big thing that narcissists will do is like they will say one thing and say, I am this thing, but they always act differently to that. So you have
Yeah.
to believe who they actually are, who they show you they are, not who
Yeah.
they say they are. But,
Uh,
when I'm a child being raised by that, it's sort of left me with a disconnect between my logic and my like emotion or what my body was telling me. So she would
right.
say things like, oh, you said this, so you're grounded. I'd be like, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. Like, but I'd be feeling crazy. Like, did I say that? I knew logically I didn't say it, but my body was like, shit, I'm on high
Right.
alert. I'm in trouble. Like something's wrong. So there's this constant disconnect. And what it does is it like gets you to divorce from yourself. You have to quiet down all those
Right.
voices, all those bad feelings, because you can't afford to have them. And then
Mm.
you sort of have to go off of their logic because that's the only thing that's safe. That's the thing that's screaming the loudest.
And that's the game they're playing. So you almost have to, like, get in the game that they're playing to try to work yourself through it. Is that a
Yeah,
good
you kind of
interpretation?
have to play the game. And yeah, I think it is a good interpretation because that's something where I spent a lot of time growing up just trying to figure her out so that I
Yeah.
could have a good relationship.
Mhm.
And but what I wouldn't do is play the game. I couldn't.
Yeah.
I just had this like this such a strong sense of justice
Yeah.
that I was just like, I will not play your game. So I learned like at a really young age to just shut down my emotions and just not be bothered by anything, which is funny because now I know that as a psychological term. It's called gray rocking, where you try to be as boring as a gray rock because it limits
Really?
it limits what they can do to you. You know, if you message me and you're a narcissist and you say, "Oh, how are you doing?" But I know you don't really want to know how I'm doing. You want to explode on me, whatever it is that you have built up for a while. If
Right.
I just say like, you know, if you say, "How are you doing?" and I literally just reply like, "Fine. How are you? Boring. How are you?" Like there's not a lot of hook that they can
Mm,
get, you know? And if they insult you and they're like, "Oh, I didn't think you'd be happy in that job," or something like that, you know, you can be like, it's fine. It doesn't really bother me." You know, because they're looking for that thing that's gonna bother you. And it's not even intentional for the most part. Like some narcissists know what they're doing, but a lot of narcissists don't even know. They're like they're making this web that is so complex, so manipulative, so coercive and controlling that they don't even know they're doing it because it's all like reflex. It's all like, I can't deal with my emotions, so I'm going to
hmm.
dysregulate yours. I can't deal with my low self esteem, so I'm going to tell you that's actually you. I feel out of
So
control in my life, so I'll control your life. Like it's not, they don't know they're doing it. It's more intuitive than that.
so are they almost like trying to pull someone down below where they feel they are? Because if they're in a way
Yeah.
they feel low, but if they feel they're higher than you, then it kind of makes them feel better. Is that
Yes, absolutely. Because if you put yourself into the mind of it, and I'm not like defending narcissists, but I've gained more sort of like compassion for it. Whereas like
yeah,
if you see somebody who's like totally psychotic, like broken from reality, like doesn't know what's going on, you see that and you go, well, I go, that sucks. They're trapped by their own mind. Like they have no
yeah,
control over that. They are screwed. Like what can they do? You know, like it
right.
must be horrible. Narcissism is very much the same, except they lead somewhat regular lives, just with poor familial and friend connections and relationship
Mm,
connections. You know, like they live very shallow, unfulfilled lives, but it's not as obvious as somebody who's just totally lost it.
right, right.
So yeah, but one of the things that my mom would say a lot, in connection with what you were mentioning about like pushing the other person lower, is she would say, "I'm here, you're here."
Oh,
So it
wow.
was yeah, she would
Oh,
do it with
okay.
the hand. And
Okay.
I heard it a lot, and I just always felt like, "That's horrible, like, why would you say that to me?"
Yeah,
But it was like, I guess when I was a kid, I didn't even think that, I just kind of thought like, "Why would you need to say that?" You know, like, because I was always wondering, like I said, I was not focused on me, I was focused on what is going on with her.
right.
So I was hearing stuff like that and thinking like, "Why would you need to say that?" Like, I remember saying something nice about my dad. I remember my dad coming home after work, and I said to my mom, like, "Oh, he's so nice. He works all day and he comes home and he's still nice, you know? Oh, that's so good." And she was
Mhm.
like, "He's not that great." Like, my brain would just be like, "Why is that? Like, what are you trying to do?
Right.
Why are you doing that?" But I think it was like what you were saying, like, she needed other people to be beneath her because she thinks so low of herself that if she can sort of raise her bar by knowing somebody else is beneath, then she can be okay. Like that's all I could think that it is.
Yeah, yeah. How confusing to be the child. Wow. I'm so sorry that you
Yeah.
went through that. Could you yeah. Whoa.
Yeah. It was very, and thank you. It's dealing with narcissism, whether like you're raised by somebody or you're in a relation, like a romantic relationship with somebody or a friendship with somebody or they're your sister or brother. It's It's very scary, and anyone can be sucked into that. Anybody.
Yeah,
And once you're in it, it is very, very difficult to get out of it. And if you're in like a home environment where somebody is like that, like there's kind of nothing you could do to an
right.
extent. Like for me, there was definitely nothing I could do, right? Because I'm the kid. I mean, I remember one time I tried to pack up I tried to pack up all my stuff into like on a stick. I remember trying to tie it on the stick, thinking because like in old movies, that's how hobos would like walk.
Yeah.
That was like the look. So
Yep.
I was like trying to put all my stuff on a stick and I was like, I'm going to escape. And I got to the front door and I just thought, okay, but where am I going to go? Like, it's just, I lived in the woods. I was like, what am I going to like live in the woods and like die in the woods? Like, there's nowhere,
Yeah.
there's
That's a
nothing I could
bad
have done.
feeling.
It,
Yeah,
yeah.
I I dealt with something like that as a little kid. I had a secret that my parents didn't know about,
Mm,
and I thought, and I had been told by the perpetrator, if they found out, they would get rid of me. So my little kid brain for a while was,
yeah.
well, why don't I leave before they find out? And then I would run
Yeah.
away. And then you're sitting there, because I would leave and we were in Curacao, which is anyways, I'd be sitting like under a cactus because it's a desert island. And I'd be like, what am I going to do? Like, really, now that I'm here, like, I'm going to just live out in the desert. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't
Yeah.
going to work. And my parents thought it was funny because they had no idea about what it really was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, they were like, oh, you want a sandwich? Oh, you're back. Okay. Like that sort of stuff. But,
Yeah.
anyways, that feeling of I have nowhere to go that's safe and I can't support myself
Yeah.
is terrifying, and you're living in fear. And it sounds like when you're dealing with someone who might be narcissistic, they almost sound like an emotional
Vampire?
uh vampire,
Yeah.
but they're like literally emotionally dangerous. Like
Yes.
if you
Yes.
try to come at them with logic and your emotions, like they appear to be destroyed almost right in front of you. You know what I mean? With any disregard for how you're actually feeling. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, and
and
it's very like the way that they argue is very terrifying. And like even if
yeah,
I like as a 33-year-old now, if I don't often get into arguments with narcissists now, but if I did, it would still probably send me back into a trauma response because it is so terrifying. And I think people don't really think about it that much, but the concept of like when you're speaking truth and you know that you're like logically explaining like the events of the day or whatever, like there's no holes in your logic, but the
right,
person looking back at you can just say like none of that's true, just with such conviction and such just like no, I don't believe you. Like it's terrifying because we all depend on logic and we all depend on like being able to connect with people and knowing that the person next to you are relying on in some way, that they want to connect to you too, so they're trying to meet you where you're
yeah,
at, and to have somebody that will never meet you where you're at, but you're always trying to meet them where they're at, but they're in la la land, so it's impossible for you to do the thing they're asking you to do. It
right,
is very, very, very confusing. Like I remember I became very logical, which a lot of survivors of narcissistic abuse become very logical, very cognitive, stuck in the head, because I was always trying to defeat her arguments with logic. Because in my mind, if I could just rely on logic and like divorce all the emotion in it, then I could make sense and they could prove to her, there would be a way that I could prove to her that what I said was true, or that I didn't do the
hmm,
thing that she said I did, or that her logic was wrong, or whatever it was. But it didn't matter. The thing coming back from her was always emotion based, but it wasn't emotion based like you hurt my feelings. It was emotion based like, I would say, but I didn't say that. And she would say something like, well, I can see why you wouldn't remember anything that you said, but this is the sort of thing you say because you treat people like trash. Like it would just
mm.
be so like
So
like
basically, condense you down into you treat people like trash. You don't even understand it, and
yeah,
just like
yeah,
condense
exactly.
it into
Not even
one.
answer the question.
Yeah, this is who you are. Wow.
Yes. And that is very a good catch. That is what a lot of them will do is they package back who you are, not a response to the question you asked, or like if you're having an argument, it's not a linear argument because they'll be jumping to whatever they can like hook on to say
Yeah.
like, oh, but you're not that good, so your argument's probably not true. Oh, but remember that one time you told me you were insecure? Well, you're probably insecure now and you're probably just lying. Like just bringing all sorts of stuff in
Man.
that isn't relevant. And it's like if you imagine a person just like throwing shoes at you while you're trying to deliver a speech or something, right? Like that's going to be really hard. You're going to be like, this is too chaotic. Like stop throwing shoes at me. But they're
Right.
throwing their emotional shoes at you. the whole time. And you're
Right.
just like, I don't know where to put that. I'll try, like, I'll try to volley with you, like, because that's what
Yeah.
you want me to do. But we're never getting back to the point, and the point's lost. And somewhere at the end, it doesn't matter that you took something from me without asking, because the fact of the matter is, I'm just a piece of garbage because I left for work on time and you wanted me to come look at your outfit. Like it circles
Right.
back to something totally ridiculous.
It's like talking to, I don't know if the right term is a habitual liar, like someone who you know is lying. You're looking right at their face.
Mm,
You walk them through the story they just gave you. It's a lie. And they will continue down the road.
yeah.
And you're like, where are we going with this? And then you're like,
Yeah.
really like, what's happening right now? Like,
Yeah. And like, why? Why is this like, what are you getting out of this?
and it's almost so bad. Like sometimes you even forget what the initial thing was. It gets so
Mm-hmm.
twisted and tangled. And you get so far away from it that you can't even remember, why did this even start? Like, and you
Yeah.
give up. It's almost like
Yeah.
they get you to give up in a little bit because you're like, whatever, fine. And then, you know what I mean? You just like
Yeah.
give up.
No,
Whatever.
completely. I mean, I used to like, once I got a little bit older, I'll circle back to some of it, but once I got a little bit older, I would only meet, well, my parents, because my dad was very much assisting her abuse.
Right.
Um, but I would refuse to meet them unless it was in a public place, like if they wanted to talk about something, so that they couldn't
Yeah.
like go crazy on me.
Yeah.
Or I would just do it over text, because then I had like proof of the words that were said to me, and I could like
Hmm.
circle back and be like, right here, reply, you said this, remember, up here. They would still
Yeah.
totally, I mean, she would just ignore it anyway, but at least I had like some proof, because a
Hmm.
lot of the time, like those of us in these relationships, like we question our own sanity all the
Yeah.
time, you know?
Yeah.
And like when it's my mom as well, like there's there's like a biological need for me to question my own sanity, because I need to believe that the person raising me is safe enough to raise me. So I
Yeah.
have to try to make it my fault. I have to try to make there
Mm.
be a reason why it's happening. And
Hmm.
so that can make you feel totally crazy. I mean, like, I know survivors of narcissistic abuse that like carry letters in their purse, or like have pinned text messages just to like remind themselves, no, 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 it can be that bad because look at what you said to me. Or like, you know, you
Right.
told me I never apologized for that thing, but I printed out the letter that I sent you and that you said you got, like that kind of thing,
Yeah.
because they need to keep reminding themselves that that person is not safe.
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't, and then again, going back to you being a child,
Hmm.
you are watching your parents, the people who are supposed to be taking care of you, keeping you safe, and you believe that, right? To an extent. These are your
Yeah.
parents. And then when they tell you stuff, you accept it because they're your parents. And how confusing must it be compared to, we'll just say the average, I mean, hopefully, what am I trying to say? Like an average parent, we hope would be um have their child's back, be proud of them, want them to grow, want to pour into
Yeah.
them, like all that kind of stuff. And you probably assume that's what was happening. And this is how it works for everyone until you finally later find out in life that, oh, my story wasn't like yours. Did you ever find that? Like running into
No.
people? No?
I no, I didn't, because lots of people have that story, but I always knew there was something wrong.
Good.
I
Okay.
still I still like absorbed a lot of the messages,
Hmm.
but logically I just knew. I mean, there's a story that a family friend told me, that like they were watching me, and when they dropped me off to my mom, I said, hoeable woman. And I was 2 years old.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, so like somehow I was absorbing that. And they thought it was funny. They were like, ha, 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 that's funny. You must have heard that somewhere. And I grew up hearing that here and there and thinking like, oh, that is kind of funny. But now I'm like, that's really sad. And
Hmm.
like it was treated as a joke. And I remember like, so that was me at like 2, I guess.
Yeah.
And I remember at like maybe, I don't know how old I was. It was after my mom got married. She got married when I was 5, my 5th birthday, which is apparently typical for narcissists to take over your birthday. And
Really? I
yeah,
didn't know that.
yeah, I
Wow.
when I was first learning about it, I listened to a Dr. Ramani. She's like a narcissistic expert. She talked about, I think specifically covert narcissists, and she mentioned like might be get married on your birthday or something like that. And I was like, that's so specific. That happened to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was somewhat after that because I had who I consider my dad around. And I remember we were staying at my great grandma's house. We were all there. We got into this like big fight. And I remember saying to my mom, I just want somebody to love me. I just want somebody to love. And I was maybe like, I don't know, like 7, 8, 9, like just
Yeah.
realizing that that was missing. Not really realizing like I do as an adult, but in the moment being like, how come I'm not getting any love? Like, can you give me some love? And
Yeah, it's like a spontaneous utterance, like from the heart. Like,
yes.
This is, okay.
Yeah, like just give me that thing, please. And she laughed at me. She thought it was funny and cute, but that's all I got. And so that's when I decided, I actually think that is the moment I decided, like, okay, she's never gonna give me what I need. They're never going to, because he didn't defend me ever. So it was like, I am just gonna have to cut myself off from her as much as possible and like hide my emotions. And like that was my only option, like, because what's more dangerous than telling my mom I need love and being laughed at? Like
Yep.
I just had to shut it down. And it's funny because my dad, I think, when I was like in my mid-20s, we were on the phone and he said something like, it's so funny because when you were a kid, like you were just so emotionless. Like I remember, like if you didn't get invited to a birthday or something, you'd just be like, whatever. And I started asking him questions. And I was like, do you remember this time? Do you remember this time? Like there was a time where I got in trouble and my mom made me give all my stuffed animals to my next door neighbor. And I said to my dad, do you remember that? Because I don't remember crying, but I remember it being horrible. And he was like, you were totally emotionless. You were just like, okay, fine. Okay. And,
You're
as
surviving.
as a kid, I was like, it is unsafe. She is unsafe. I cannot express because it will be used against me. And, there are times where I express myself anyway because, like, it's really hard to be emotionless when you have so many emotions. But for the most part, yeah, I shut being with that sort of parenting. Like, I shut down.
It seems like it feels like when you tell that story, it's like someone poking you. And then finally, when you say, stop poking with me, and they're like, oh, look at you. You're so upset. You know what I mean? And you're like,
Which was
what
a
do you
fun game
mean?
she would play, actually, physically.
What?
She would actually do that. Yeah, she would like tickle me or like poke me or something. And I'd be like, Mom, please stop. Just stop. As soon as I start saying stop, she'd be like, oh, you can't say stop. Like, oh, no, it's just fun. It's just a fun game. And she'd go harder and harder until I would go like, stop it. And she'd be like, you're grounded. Because she just wanted that reaction from me. So yeah, it is like that. It's exactly like that.
Wow. That sounds like a bully.
Yeah.
That's what that
My
sounds
mom was
like.
my first bully. And
Wow.
it's really sad to think about, like,
It is.
yeah, like I used to joke in school, like when I got a little bit older, there was this running joke around my friends that I couldn't hang out because I buttered the toast wrong because I was always grounded. So I was
Oh.
always, and that's another thing narcissists will do is they'll isolate you. So I was always sort of isolated from my friends. I'd have lots of fun at school, but I didn't make a lot of those deeper relationships because I almost never was allowed to go to a sleepover. I didn't hang out with anyone after school. I was always grounded. So I was unavailable, but I sort of like all I could do was joke. Like when I got a little bit older, when I was maybe like 12, 13, like getting into puberty and stuff like that, getting a little bit more like hormones coming through, being a bit more angry, I would just like, I remember my mom dropping me off in the morning. She'd like say something really horrible. I'd be like crying, screaming or whatever. Then I'd get out of the car and go like, whoop, okay, I'm here. And just be normal for the day. And I was just like cool, jokey, like, haha. I was like popular. Like I didn't realize I was masking. But I was just basically like, this is my real life. I'm going to forget all of that happens to me every day. and
Yeah.
that's not the norm for everybody else.
And is that where you tried to find like some sort of like emotional comfort, like with your friends, like real relationships? You're like, okay, at least I have this here. Was there any of that? Like,
A little bit. I think, one of the things that's really hard for me now is looking back and just realizing how shut off I was emotionally
mm,
because I couldn't afford to be open at home and I couldn't figure out how to be open sometimes and closed other times.
right,
And
right.
so at school, like people liked me and like I was, I guess, interesting. Like I would talk about things, but whenever it came to the stuff with my parents, like it was always a joking thing. It was never like I actually really need help.
Hmm.
And a lot of that is because the things that she would do were so like death by a thousand cuts.
Hmm.
So it would be things like, I was learning to play piano and she would stand behind me and say, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, stuff like that, where if I just told somebody that's happening, they'd be like, okay, like that's not a big deal.
Right.
But when it's like everywhere all the time, it's a really difficult thing to describe. And like, I didn't put any of this together until I was like, I don't know, like in my 20s. Like, I could not figure out what had happened to me. I just
Hmm.
knew she was really volatile. I knew I was always in trouble. I knew I could not say anything right. I knew that, if I tried to do something that I liked or like showed my own personality, that was a problem. But I
Mm,
didn't know why. So I didn't even know what to say. It's sort of
right.
like I didn't have words for it, you
Hmm.
know? I
Yeah.
didn't have any words for it. So I had a really shallow connection with people. I mean, I had a few friends who I talked to a bit more, but I would just talk about like, oh, I feel like depressed. I wouldn't really talk about the why as much because yeah, I just did not have words for it at all. And I
Yeah.
think the other thing is narcissists are really good at hiding their behavior,
Hmm.
for the most part. So my mom was like the fun mom. That's what my
Oh,
friends thought. And they would go on all the school trips and things. Like I remember we had this trip to Mexico and we didn't have much money at the time. I think I was always told that, but I don't know now, like if that was true,
right.
because they were like, we don't have the money, you can't go, like it's too much money. And then the next thing I hear about it, I can go, but they're both coming with me. So I'm like, how's that not 3 times more expensive? But there'd be things like that where for me, I'd be like, I don't get to do anything for myself. I can only go because you want to go, So I would see it one way. And then
Right.
my friends would see it as like, oh, she's so cool. She wants to hang out with us and like tell us ghost stories. And like, she's the fun, cool mom in Mexico. Like,
Yeah.
so they think that that's the person I have
Yeah.
at home. So I would say things. And even though there was this running joke of like, I just did something tiny wrong and they got that I was always grounded, they didn't get like the sinister nature of what was
Yeah.
behind it. They just thought like, oh, she's always grounded. Oh, she's always acting up. Even if it's a small thing, she just can't control herself, sort of a thing. Like the
Oh,
person my mom showed other people was just not the person that she was at
right.
home. Like even things like, she never talked to me about like my period or anything like that. And
Hmm.
I got my period when I was away at camp. Thank goodness, because that was a great experience for me. But when I came back, she made my dad talk to me about it, which is just, I don't know, it's just sort of weird because dads never get their periods. But she
I
would
can imagine
do
my dad having that conversation with my sister. I
yeah.
don't.
So it was just like, and yeah, and the conversation was weird. And she just like, she was sort of mad at me that I had started my period at camp, like I could control it. And then it was like the next weekend or so that I had friends over and I went to the bathroom. And when I came back, she was showing all my friends how to use a tampon. So it was stuff like that where they're like, oh, you're the cool, nice, helpful mom. But to me, I didn't get any of that. And I remember she like gave my friend her phone number, like, call me if you ever need help. Cause she had like parents who were going through a divorce and she would call my mom for help. And, my mom did the same thing with I have a little sister who's about to turn 18 next month. And when she was younger, she had a friend, and my mom also talked to that friend and had that friend's number, just trying to like be relevant, be cool to somebody other than your daughter.
Man, it sounds like there's so much going on with that. Like, one is like, is the narcissist trying to control the external environment to basically manipulate other people's feelings so that if you were to say something to that exact same person, they'd be like, "Oh no, I met your mom. She's great."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
like there's
So what
that
can you
going
say?
on.
Yeah.
Right. And you're like, well, that's not who's at home. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it would be
So there's a
things.
lot.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah. There's a
lot going
lot.
on
I
with
mean,
that.
and it would be things like, for me, it had a really big impact on like what my identity was, because I
Hmm.
didn't really have like, it took me a lot of years to realize I didn't really have an identity. Like, I was
Right.
just told to do things and I was in trouble all the time. And the only things that like she really said about me were that like all the boys liked me, and she was angry that when I was in puberty and I got boobs, she was angry that they were bigger than hers. So it was sort of like I was my value was like related to like sexiness, but also
That's
only in a bad fetishy way.
ugh.
So it was just sort of like at every turn, there was like a pushing down of what came next. You start individuating, and that's a problem. You start changing your body, something I couldn't control, and that's a problem.
Right.
Like anything that changed for me, like for the better, was a problem. And I remember like knowing I was smart, but
Mhm.
she would only say that to other people. She wouldn't say that to me. She'd be like, "Oh yeah, Allie's so smart, blah, blah, blah. She gets it from
Right.
me," or something like that. But it would never, to me, it would always just be like, "Oh, like all the boys like you, like they're obsessed with you." Like if I said bye to a guy friend and got in the car, she'd be like, "He likes you, I can tell." Just like always sort of making it about sexuality. And like I remember around that same age, she had a talk with me and she was like, "You need to stop being so close with your dad. Like it's kind of weird because you're like getting older, it's kind of sexual." Just like isolating me using that, which I
Wow.
which I know sounds crazy as I say it, but it's actually really
No,
typical.
I believe it. They're using guilt, they're using shame. They're 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 trying to cast doubt on even, like, the way you operate mentally, and now she's going after what you can't help physically,
Yeah.
and wow. Well, I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. I mean,
Thanks.
I'm so glad that you're here able to talk about it today because I know it's gonna help a whole lot of people. Was there a time at all that, like, or an age where you did decide, "I gotta get out of here"? Like, was it, like, after high school and you're like, I need to leave," or
Yeah.
how did you navigate after that?
So, I remember being in elementary school. I think I was like 10 because I moved schools when I was 11. And I remember thinking, I'm going to escape as soon as I can. And what I thought was the only way to do that was to get married.
Mm,
So I was like, I'm going to get married and I'm going to have kids, and that will like remove me. And for some reason, I remember at the time I thought 19, that's the age when I can like make that happen.
yeah.
Um, So I always wanted to escape. Like I'd always pray about it at night. I'd be like screaming to God, being like, "Please change her or get me out of here." So yeah, I was always trying to escape, or like, wanting to. But I moved out when I was 19. So when I was 18, I wanted to move out. I graduated high school and I was like, I want to move out, but I didn't have the money to do that. And I had a
Mhm.
college fund from my parents that my grandpa Dan had started and that they had contributed to. And they were like, well, we can help you, but only if you stay at home for another year and get good grades. So it was just sort of like there's always strings. Like that one's not so crazy, but like there's always just strings attached to things. So I stayed until I was
Mhm.
19. And then I moved out. And as soon as I moved out, it helps that I studied psychology. So I started
Mhm.
learning a lot more about this stuff. And I just realized that anytime, because when I was home, it was just like, I'm home, she's home. when I moved out, you have to actually make time to see each other, right? So
Mhm.
whenever I would see her, all she would ever talk about was how bad my dad is and how bad these two friends of theirs were because they had like a big friend breakup around that time. And
Mhm.
it was pretty sad. But she would just complain and complain and complain and complain and complain. And that's all I would get. Like I'm not sure she ever asked me, like, how are your classes? How are you?
Mm.
Like
Right.
it just wasn't a thing. And so I started distancing myself more and more. And I remember like I used to, anytime we would talk on the phone, I would always say I love you at the end.
Mhm.
But I always did that because I felt like I had to.
Mhm.
Because even though she wouldn't show me that she loved me, I always had to prove that I loved her.
Mhm.
So I would do that. And then I stopped doing that because I was like, you know what? It feels really false. I'm learning more about this now. So, like, I know there's a problem here. Like, this feels like I'm being forced to do it. So I started
Mhm.
saying it less. And she picked up on that. And she was
Mhm.
like, how come you don't say this anymore? And I actually, because again, I went to school for psychology. When you go to school for psychology, they make you do counseling. So I was in counseling, and that was
Mhm.
really helpful. And
Good.
so I really, yeah, really good. So I realized like I don't feel safe talking to her unless it's in a therapist's office. And
Mm.
so I said to her, like, if you really want to discuss it, we can talk about it in therapy. And she was pretty angry about that for a while. And she kept
Mhm.
bringing things up to me because that's narcissists. Another thing they do is they're always pushing boundaries. They're always seeing kind of like, not to like diminish, but literally like the stage of at like childhood when you're a toddler and you're like, mine, this, and you're trying to figure out where the boundaries are. Like they
Yeah.
will do that sort of thing. So I would say that. And then, you know, the next day she'd be messaging me saying, hey, let's talk about this. And I'd go, again, this is my boundary, therapy. And then she'd be like, but I don't understand why. And she'd be trying to talk about it. We
Yeah.
eventually started going to therapy, and even then I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know it was narcissism. I just thought she was a liar. And
Mhm.
and I remember in therapy her saying things to me and the therapist like, oh, I can never say things right. I can never get it right. And it would be like, you know, the therapist saying, how do you feel about what Allie just said? And what came out of her mouth was like a judgment about me.
Right.
And the therapist would say, oh, okay, that's a judgment. That's not a feeling. How do you feel? And she'd be like, I can't say anything right. So it was just sort of like this pity party and we
Yeah.
weren't getting anywhere. And I, again, was just confused. Like, what is this? Like, here I am
Right.
trying, I'm doing everything I can, still trying everything I can. And it just came to nothing. Like, it wasn't helpful. And we
Yeah.
spent a couple of years like that. And then I moved
Was there a
away.
was there a period of time where you were almost like sort of seeking or maybe even desperate for answers, like desperate for her to at least be able to articulate kind of like what's been happening in her head, but almost sad because she couldn't get there?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that happened last year. It took
Okay.
a long time for me to get to that. Um, so basically, so just to like sum up, I moved out. I started living my own life. Every time I saw her, it was difficult, right? I mean, I used to like
Right.
babysit every week, so I'd see her regularly. But every time I did, there was like weird boundaries around everything. It was just always, she was always trying to get me to like be a second parent to my sister and like always parrot what she said back. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. So everything was weird. And we just grew further and further apart. And then I moved to Wales. So I'm from
Okay.
California and I moved to the UK, to Wales, um, for a 1 year songwriting program because I'd
Mhm.
always written songs and I really wanted to like explore. I was working as a drug and alcohol counselor at the time.
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah, and I loved it, but I just felt like there was something missing. Like there was just more I wasn't exploring.
Yeah.
So I moved away and I still live here. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I did the year. I met my husband, we got married, and we moved here like
Mhm.
permanently. And it was really like once I moved here that like permanently that I started realizing just how much like trauma and actually abuse I had been through. Like, I didn't even allow myself to call it abuse
Right.
until, my late 20s, really.
Yeah. I'm convinced that a child doesn't understand they're even being abused for a long time. Like and
Yeah.
man, and the fact that you almost had to like get out in the world, and there's a lot of things going on for me personally, like time does help heal me. You know what I mean? The farther away I get from something,
Mm,
it seems like I'm able to see it a little bit better, especially if I've gone farther down the road. Hindsight's always 2020, and you kind of like you can see the chart, like kind of where the
yeah.
life went and what was happening and all that kind of stuff. But when you're in the middle of it, it's super confusing. And
It's
I'm just talking
really
about,
hard.
yeah, I'm just talking about basic stuff like in life. And you're
Yeah.
talking about the person that's supposed to be pointing you in the direction that that would be good for you. And,
Yeah.
they're more worried about themselves. That's a shame. But I'm
Yeah.
so
And
glad that you're able to talk about it.
yeah, thank you. I mean, it took a long time to even understand it enough to talk about it
Hmm.
because it's just so complicated. But once I realized what narcissism really was, I got it because it's textbook. It's actually textbook. And so I
Was it
can look
like
and
an
be like, there it is. Okay, that makes sense. It didn't make sense for so long. I'm so glad I have an answer.
Yeah, it must have been like an aha moment, like a life-altering aha, like, "Oh, this is
Yeah.
real."
It was sort of like many aha moments because,
Yeah.
like, around the time that I got married, I realized that's what it was, but I didn't know much about it. And I
Mhm.
had just gotten married and I was like working on myself and stuff. And I had spent so much time, I stayed in therapy all the way through.
Yeah.
So I had spent so much time trying to fix myself, like
Mm.
behaviorally, like trying to fix the
Yeah.
problems with me. And I had never looked at any deeper. I never worked with a trauma therapist to actually be like, what actually happened to me? What are the wounds that are there? So I can work on
Right.
like fixing them for myself, healing them for myself. Um, and so once I started doing that, around like the later end of COVID, I started working with a trauma therapist, 2021. Um, and I started realizing like, oh my gosh, it's not me. It was never me. Like I knew it wasn't, but like in my bones now, I was like, it was never me. I never deserved that. And the behavior was so much worse than what I allowed myself to believe. Even
Mhm.
just down to like during COVID, I stopped responding as much because we were still talking like every day, like on the phone every day,
Yeah.
um, and texting and all that. And I just stopped responding as much. And I realized that it was me who was carrying the whole relationship. It was me calling her. Like
Yeah.
because I had to, right? I
Mhm.
had to, but it was me putting in all the work. The only thing she would do is she would message me, how are you? And if I didn't reply in 2 minutes, there'd be question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark. Like, why aren't you
Mhm.
responding immediately? But once I realized that, like, I stepped back and like she wasn't trying, that's
Mm.
when I was like, oh, okay. Actually, I've been so focused on her. I've not really noticed that I've been the one doing all the work and that like part of me doing that work was to kind of like, if I could try hard enough, it would kind of mask the fact that she wasn't trying. It could
Mhm.
kind of like, if I reminded her of things like, aren't you happy for me that this happened? Are you, like if I could sort of like make her do it, like make her kind of
Yeah.
love me. You know what I mean? It was like I was trying to make her
Yeah.
love me, but I
Yeah.
wasn't even realizing that that's what I was doing. And once I
Mm.
started working with a trauma therapist and getting to the bottom of it, which I really only did like 2 years ago, is like, oh, the bottom of it is my mom doesn't love me. And that's terrifying. And that's
Yeah.
something that I wasn't willing to accept, like at all. And so I did everything that I could to block that out so that I could pretend like I had something, even though the
Yeah.
relationship never worked, even though if I needed her, she wasn't there. Like I could just pretend. And it was really only like I learned that in my head, but I really started to learn it in my bones and like in my
Mhm.
body, like feeling like, I started doing inner child work with my therapist and I was just like,
Awesome.
yeah, inner child work is the best. Like, all we can do to heal is like love ourselves. But
Yeah.
I hated myself and I didn't even know it. So many people hate themselves and they don't know it because they don't realize that you should love yourself, that like that's a way of being.
Yeah.
And when I did my inner child work, I started writing letters to my younger self. Like that was sort of the first homework assignment. And I told my therapist, I was like, I don't want to talk to her. I hate her. She was always bad. Everybody treated her like she was bad. So I
Oh,
feel
wow.
like I should be mean to her. And it was like, oh, that's my mom coming through. That's
Yeah.
not
That's
actually
trauma.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was when I
Mm.
started like working through that and getting into like more somatic forms of healing, like listening to the body, like how did it actually feel in my body when that was said? Like
Wow.
I really started just opening up, and then I got really sick, and that sort of was like the thing that dropped the penny completely.
Really? Would
Yeah, yeah. I got
s s
so yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
No, I was gonna ask, what do you mean? Tell me the story.
So I was working through all this stuff. I was really in the heart of it, the realization that like she didn't love me. And that was like the big thing for me. And that I had
Yeah.
always tried to get her to love me. That was a big thing. Cause I had always been like, no, I hate her. Like, but it was like, no, I actually don't. Um,
No, and there's that inner desire. Did it feel young, like a young
oh
child, just
yeah.
like, "Just love me," you know what I mean?
It
Like,
was
"What
literally
else do
that
I have to
like
do?"
whatever age I was when I said, just like,
Yeah,
I need somebody to love. It was that kid. And I was like, oh my gosh, I remember that feeling now. I had blocked
yeah,
that out, but that's been there the whole time. And
and
I
that cry
realized
that
that.
comes with it. The cry, like, it's weird
Yeah.
because I've done that work too, and you cry at the age that you felt you were. So, like,
Yeah,
I
totally.
was crying, like, as a five-year-old. You know, your
Yeah,
chest hurts and you, like,
yeah.
your tummy hurts and you're balled up, and it's
Yeah.
like, I'm
And then you have
I'm
that, like, frog in your throat, you're like,
right there. Yep,
yeah,
yep, right there. And it's like it
yeah.
takes you back to that moment. Yeah. Wow.
It totally
Anyways, and
does. Yeah, well, so I
it
got there. I got there, and then I got, mono, which here they call glandular fever.
okay.
Um And so I was working on all this trauma stuff, and I was also I had just finished up this like school related course I was doing, and then I had just finished up a somatic coaching course, and I was like doing all this extra stuff, and so I was really busy. And my husband sat
Mhm.
me down and was like, "You need to do less. You know how you're always talking about doing less. You need to do less here." And I was like, "I'm trying, but I've got all these things." And like, and then I
Yeah.
got sick, right? Because I was
Yeah.
like, I wore myself out, and
Mhm.
when I got sick, I kept going to the doctor being like, this isn't right. Cause I was sick for like 2 months
Yeah.
and they just kept telling me it was anxiety. And I only later found out through blood tests that they had done and not followed up on that I had had glandular fever. So mononucleosis, mono.
Yeah.
And I had this thing called Alice in Wonderland syndrome, which I had never heard of, but it's where the world starts looking kind of like fake, like kind of like you're in a dream. And
Mm.
it's from brainstem swelling, which you can get
Oh,
from
wow.
mono. And
Oh,
because,
wow.
yeah, and because my doctor was telling me, you know, you need to stop sleeping so much and you need to go get out there and start walking and start doing things. Not knowing I had mono, it was just getting worse. So I literally would look at the clouds and be like, they don't look real. I feel like I'm in a fishbowl. I don't know what to do. And I had like a mini mental breakdown because I was
Oh,
just
yeah, it
like,
does.
yeah, because now I look back and I'm like, oh, I was not insane, I was sick. But at the time, I was like, I think I'm insane. And I
Yeah.
just like, I was crying all the time. And my husband's dad died during that time. And that was really traumatic. And I just broke down. And my dad actually sent me this book, Letting Go, The Pathway to Surrender. It's a really great
Mhm.
book, but it's about obviously letting go. And I was
Yeah.
like, whatever, I'll just read it. That's fine. And I read it and I was like, oh my gosh, that's what I need. I was trying to control everything. Like I was trying to control my feelings. I was trying to push it down. I was so scared of the pain of my mom not loving me, of being ill, being out of control of my body because I
Yep.
always had to control it for her. Like I couldn't be
Mhm.
hungry when it wasn't time to eat. I couldn't pee when it wasn't time to pee. You know, like so I was so used to pushing everything down that when I finally got sick and I couldn't do anything about it, just all my emotions came up and I
Yeah.
felt like I was going to die. because it was
Mhm.
terrifying. And I didn't even realize I had been pushing them down for so long. But
Yeah.
then I started working through on a deeper level those emotions and like letting them go, like letting them kind of like if it was guilt, I'd be like, okay, let the guilt like go everywhere in my body. Like I'm just gonna like accept it into all of me and then let it
S
go, you
so you
know?
would feel it. You would let yourself feel it instead of trying to avoid it, which
Yes.
which is so hard to do, especially the first
Yeah.
couple times, but it
Yes.
works.
It
It's
works so
like
well. Why don't
you're
people
like,
talk about this more?
where did all that energy go? Like, I've just been sitting
Yeah.
here for 2 minutes, letting myself feel sad, and now I don't feel sad anymore.
Yeah.
You know,
It's
you're
like
like,
literally all
"Oh."
it takes is like listening to the message and being like, okay, yeah, I know you're sad. And then the body's like,
Yeah,
okay, cool. As long as you know, you
yeah.
know?
We had on a gentleman who had 10 plus strokes. They stopped keeping
Oh,
track
wow.
after 10 plus strokes, and he's wheelchair bound. He's not unable to do anything on his own, and when it comes to feelings, he was the one who suggested, "You have to feel them. You have to let
Yeah.
them wash over you. You have to feel the feels, as uncomfortable that
Yeah.
it is, but you're gonna get through it that way compared to avoiding it." And I was
And
like,
it's so much
"Wow."
better. It's so much better.
Yeah,
Like, even if, like, for anybody listening right now, like, even if you have a horrible feeling, physical or emotional, like, sit with that for a second of the like pushing it away and then try to let it in and you'll notice how much easier it gets once you let
yeah,
it in. Like even just I burned my hand the other day pretty bad and it was just like burning and burning and burning and I was like help help I don't know what to do and my husband was like oh let me figure out what to do and then he had this like spray that's supposed to help and I was like wait don't spray it yet because I want to try the Sedona method, which is like a method of letting go, right? It's like of feeling it.
yeah.
And so I tried it and it went down like 50%. It decreased the pain
What?
because I had never done it with physical pain before. And I
I'd
was
never
like,
even heard
that's
of that.
awesome. It's so good. I mean, it's basically like what you were just saying, but it breaks it down so that it's like an easier practical process. So it's like what's the feeling? Name the feeling. Can
Mhm.
I okay, I felt the feeling. Can I let the feeling go? If the answer is yes, will I let it go? If that answer is
Will.
yes,
Mhm.
when will I let it go? So it makes it your choice. And then if you
I
decide
love
it's
it.
right now, you go, I do like a physical, like I'm letting it go to the universe. So I just did
Oh,
that.
wow.
And yeah, it was like 50% reduction. And then I could like think, whereas
That was a
I
gold
couldn't
nugget.
before. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's so good, honestly. So
that
it's
was a
just
little
like,
gold. I
yeah.
hope everyone's paying attention. That was a good golden nugget right there. That's on a whole nother level. I never considered doing it with physical pain. And then those
Yeah.
questions are great because 'cause you're right, they put them right it puts it in your lap.
Yeah, you make the
Will
choice.
I let this go? I mean, that's an important question. Will I let this go?
Yeah.
Because that was a big hinge for me. I was, after I got hurt, I ran on resentments for a very long time,
Mhm, yeah.
and man, do those end up hurting you end up hurting yourself. I mean, we've all heard it. It's like drinking poison, expecting the other person to die
Yeah.
and, like, all that kind of stuff, but
Yeah, so true.
it's like instinctual, though, you know what I mean? Like, these feelings that you're
Yeah.
having of just, like and you try to let it go the best you can, and, I would find myself in these cycles of just, like, resentment, and I know now that by letting myself eventually feel the feels, even about myself, you know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
And letting myself accept that I'm not a perfect human being and I've made mistakes too, and like all this kinds of stuff, and just letting yourself feel it, especially, man, because when you've been told by an adult that you are either dirty, unlovable, there's something wrong with you, you absorb it. You absorb
Yeah,
it, and
yeah.
you do it, and you try to push against it almost like with action, like you were. Um, what I did when I was a little kid is like I was told by a perpetrator that, I wasn't gonna go to heaven, my parents weren't gonna love me and like all this kinds of stuff. And I
Mm,
believed it. And then for the longest time, you actually believe that it's true
yeah.
because you trust adults. They're
Yeah,
supposed to you almost believe they've been blessed at some point. Okay, now you're an adult. You're
yeah.
now allowed to have children. So you like instinctually as a
And you're
child be like,
porous. You're really
Yeah.
porous as a kid. They say you're a sponge, you soak things up, you soak up knowledge. You also soak up all the judgments that you hear around you. You only
Yeah.
know so much. You've not met a person who said the opposite to you. So when you hear that, there's not enough pushing against that to tell you
You're right.
otherwise. You don't
Right.
have your own sense of logic until you're older.
Yeah. And you probably had to go deep in there and actually like grab that child and be like, you are beautiful. You know what I mean? And like
Yeah.
because it sounds like
Yeah.
with a narcissist, they're almost trying to control the narrative almost in you as well.
Yeah,
They,
literally in your body, in your mind. It's sort of like if you've ever read 1984 by George
mhm,
Orwell about like
yeah,
Big Brother and government like taking over, and
yeah,
there's something in the book around like you have to use certain language and you have to like think certain thoughts. You can't think other thoughts. There's thought blocking and thought control and language control, and it's the same thing but on a micro level. I
yeah.
mean, I read this book called Thought Reform, the something of totalism, like the psychology of totalism, maybe. I think it's a Jay Lifton book. I don't know, but it was about like communist China and the
Okay.
methods they used to get people to like confess to things was the
Mm,
same that I had as a kid that like narcissists use in a family structure or in a two-person relationship. Like it's thought reform, it's thought control. It's just like they control you so much that like as an adult, I didn't even know that I was still being controlled. I mean, like when so I mentioned earlier that I have my own podcast. So I started my own podcast in 2023, the end of 2023. And
mhm,
I posted it like publicly, but I did not advertise it at all because I was so terrified that she would see it. And
mm,
anytime I thought about posting publicly about it, I would actually have a freeze response. So my
really?
breath would start getting like
Yeah,
and my heart would start racing, and I couldn't. I literally couldn't because I was still controlled by what she might do
yeah,
if I made a move that worked for myself.
yeah,
And so I posted it in November 2025. I started it in October 2023. So it took
okay,
me that long to like post about it and show people and tell people, hey, this is me. Because
yeah,
part of my like letting go was also, like you said, letting go of the resentments that built up because I had been poisoning myself. I'd been poisoning myself so much that I hated me just as much as what she did to me.
right.
And
Isn't that weird how
it
that
was,
does that? Like you end
yeah,
up hating yourself be-
yes,
because
with
this
with no
person,
good reason.
none,
Yeah. But
none.
I did. I hated myself. And when I finally let all that drop, I realized that the truth of the relationship had been true since the day I was born. One of us was going to survive the relationship, and it was going to be me or it was going to be her. And she always chose her, and I always chose her. And it was time for me to
Hmm.
choose me. And
Yeah,
so I put it out there. I put it out there. I put like I'm a coach. I help women with a lot of the same stuff that I've been through. I put that out there. It was
yeah,
hard because I have somebody who's narcissistic who sees that and immediately flips the lid. And I lived
yeah,
in fear of that for so long. And I just had to I had to drop the resentments. I had to stop worrying about my emotions overwhelming me. I had to just let it happen and
hmm,
realize that I was valuable and that
yeah,
it was worth it for me to share my story, and that if I didn't, I was just dying a slow death. I was
yeah,
just allowing her still to push me down. I was still keeping our secret, and
yes,
I didn't want to keep our secret anymore.
yeah. Yeah, well said. It's like by not living authentically to who you are, it's almost like you're sacrificing that part of you. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Because you know you're you actually don't know who you are for a long period of time,
yeah,
but it's like you're willing to sacrifice who you are to fit the mold of what they're looking for. And I don't
yes,
think we realize that we're doing that because it's
yeah,
survival at that
yeah.
point, you know?
You don't have
But
time to think about it. You're
right,
just
but when
trapped
you
by it.
and as you look back now, though, you can see it. You know,
Yeah,
it's really hard to
really
take
clearly.
advice when you're on fire. This is
Yeah,
the best way I explained. Like
exactly.
if you're on fire, it's hard to take advice. Now, looking back at it, oh, thanks for you. You know what? I wasn't able to hear you at that moment, but I understand
Yeah.
now how you were trying to help me. Because you're panicking, it's a
Yeah.
natural thing.
And it's hard as well. Like a lot of survivors struggle with the thought, I'm sure you've thought of this as well, of like, I'm the one who survived this terrible thing. Now I have to do all this extra work. Like it wasn't even my fault. And now I have
Right.
to do all this work because I'm like not broken, but people say it that way. You know, like I'm broken from all that was done to me or this horrible experience that I had. And now I have
Yeah.
to do all this work to fix
Hmm.
it. And
Yeah.
so a lot of people just don't. But they
Yeah, I
don't
know. Yeah.
realize that they're stuck in it. Yeah, they don't realize that like the freedom is facing yourself, learning to love yourself, because otherwise you're just playing the same game over and over again, and it's their game. And you have to ignore yourself, divorce yourself, make yourself small. You have to totally betray who you are as a person. Even if you don't know who
Hmm.
you are, you're betraying who you are as a person just to try to make somebody else happy or just to try to get the pain to go away, like whatever it is. And it doesn't
Yeah.
work. It doesn't work, and you don't get to be you.
And
No one
then, like,
wins.
if I can only imagine a situation where it's like a spouse or if it's a loved one, you get small, you fit in their box, and then they leave. And in a way, you've kind of forgotten who you are. I
Yeah.
could see that happening very easily. Like and you'd be so
Mhm.
confused. Like I did what you said. I looked how you wanted me to look. I said the things you wanted me to say. And
And
now
I'm
you're
still not good
leaving
enough.
and I'm still not good enough.
Yeah.
And I realize now that by doing that, I was dying a slow death, like you said, by suffocating who I really am.
Yeah.
So then you've got that work that you're discussing, like you come out of it, you're like, so what the and there's for me there's shame in it too. You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
can't
There's
believe
huge
I let
shame.
myself do that. But then you got to work on that too. You're like, no, there's no shame here. Like this is where we're starting. We are getting going. This is an awesome thing we're doing. So you have to kind of like remind
Yeah.
yourself. And
You have
but
to
I was
like
so
rewire that. Yeah.
because you're always looking back. So like in trauma response, you're looking back, you're looking back, you're looking back. What can I learn more from these things that happened? How could I even, and then you dream about how it could be different or how it could have been different. Like, well,
Yeah.
what if
Like
this would have
mourning what
happened?
you could have
And,
done or what they could have been
and,
different. Yeah.
and you're stuck in there and you're playing with the past. And then that anxiety projects to the future, hoping that it doesn't happen again. And if it does,
Yeah.
this is what I would do. This is what I would say. This is how I would control it. So you're like banging back and forth. And I
Yeah.
found myself not really being in the present a lot of the time, you know?
A lot of survivors are not. They don't live their lives in the present. I still struggle with that. It is
Yeah.
really hard to live your life in the present. But the thing is, like, if you don't, and if you don't learn this stuff, and if you don't do the work, then you're primed for being a victim again. And that's a
Yeah.
scary thing to say, but like people need to know that because
The,
if you are used to being treated like crap and then the person leaves, you subconsciously, physiologically, like you will attach yourself to the next person who treats you like crap because that's what you're used to.
and
That
try to
is
make sure it
what's
doesn't happen
familiar.
again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you try to like, yeah, your trauma response is to like try to correct the situation by putting yourself in the same situation and fixing it this time. But it's not
Yeah.
possible. And the
Right.
only way we get around that is by doing the work. There's no way out of it. If you want to be happy anyway. If you want to be happy, if
Yeah.
you want to
Yeah.
live a
Yeah.
life that's yours, like, and what I always say as well is like, in these relationships, we learn that we have to earn love and we're never successful at it. So we're always just trying, like, please love me. I'll do anything for you to love me. And it's
Yeah.
this notion that, like, that the way that I see it now is like self love is not something that's earned, it's something that's learned. And you just
Mm,
haven't been taught how to love yourself. You need to learn how to love yourself, and that will show other people how to love you. But if you're brought up by, or if you're in a relationship with somebody who is teaching you that you need to earn their love, it's difficult for you to ever learn that you're worthy anyway.
right. You
So
learn love the wrong way initially. So you're like, "Oh, love
yeah,
works this way. I need to be valuable to you, and that
yeah,
that makes you love me. And if I'm not
yeah,
valuable, then you won't love me," which is not how love actually works. Love is freely given. Love is about
exactly.
support. Love is,
And that's the sort of thing it attracts as well. Like once you learn that and you learn to always be like trying to earn love, you only really attract people who want you to be doing that, who want you to
yeah,
be proving that you're lovable because they can see that like a bright neon sign, even if you
really.
can't. And
Yeah.
it's horrible. I mean, I had a lot of, luckily for me, like I didn't have a lot of, the typical route for me would have been to like marry somebody like that or date
Hmm.
people like that. I ended up having quite a few narcissistic friends. I think maybe just because it was my mother that was a narcissist. So I ended up attaching myself sometimes to narcissistic girlfriends.
Right.
Um, but once I started learning more about this and about like what I deserved, I no longer was willing to be treated that way, which meant that
Hmm.
those people weren't attracted to me anymore. And the same with like my mom is not attracted to me is weird. But she also like after I got sick, that whole like 2025, most of 2025 was me like reaffirming all of this for myself, and helping other people in the same sort of context through my coaching. But
Yeah.
in May, I went on this big road trip with my husband all over Europe for his cousin's wedding, and we just like extended it. It was really fun.
Cool.
Um, but when we were there, I got this message from my mom that was so shitty. And we had this like back and forth. And luckily it was like at the end of the trip. So we were in Calais in France. We stayed the night in this hotel just before taking the Eurotunnel back to the UK.
Yeah.
And so we were in this really shitty hotel in this really like not great area. And I got this horrible message and it was so long and it was just like, I've always done everything for you. And like, why would I take accountability for things when like, I haven't done anything wrong. Like it was just this whole thing back and forth that I didn't have any interest in. And
Yeah.
I just saw the way she was talking and I just saw this message come through that was basically like, because I told her, I was like, I love myself now. I didn't say that part to her, but like, I love myself now, so I won't put up with it. So like,
Yeah.
unfortunately, it puts me in a weird position where like, I no longer am able to put up with it because I see it now. And so when it came
Hmm.
my way, I responded back and I was like, the thing you're doing right here is called gaslighting. Like the thing you're doing
Yeah.
right here is called, manipulating. The thing you're doing right here. And I just called it all out. And
And she knew you were on a trip. Like she
she
had
knew
to
I
have
was on
known
a
you were
trip.
on a trip.
Yeah,
That's
she
the
knew.
craziest thing.
I
You know
know.
what I mean?
She
She
knew.
knows you're on a trip, so she slings this to you. Anyways, keep
Yeah,
going.
exactly, because it has to be about her. So, sorry, that was brash. But yeah, so
Sorry.
so that happened, and I just said, like, look, I would have a relationship with you. Like you're always saying you want more of one. Like I would have that, but I'm not gonna lie to be able to have that. And this is how I
Hmm.
see you, and I still love you, but you're never gonna be there for me, basically. I was like, I know that. If you still want to have a relationship, like, fine, I'm
Hmm.
here, but it's really in your hands because you keep saying you want a better relationship, but you won't do anything about it.
Right.
And her response back was like, if you think the power's in my hands and that what I can do to get back in relationship with you is like fix all my problems, well, then maybe I'm not so powerful after all. Like that's how she ended it. And I was like, I don't know, something solidified where I was just like, wow, it is never going to change. And I've always known that. Like in my head, I always
Hmm.
knew that. But I just felt it in my body. Like it is never going to change. Like there's not a thing that I could do. And it's not my responsibility anymore. It never was, but I wore it for so long to try to fix
Hmm.
things, to try to make it better, to like reach out as much as possible. And I was just like, I'm done. I can't anymore. Like
Yeah.
I can no longer afford to be treated that way because I now know that I'm worth more than that. And then that's when I was like, okay, I'm going to post everything and I'm just going to like be myself and not care about it anymore. And yeah,
Yeah.
it just hit me right in the face.
And that must have been a moment that came with multiple emotions. One is sad, you know what I mean? One is angry to an
Ugh,
extent, and then
yeah.
the other one is like fed up, you know?
Yeah, there was a sense of like relief as well. Like in the moment,
Yeah.
I was crying and crying, and my husband was like doing like petting my hair, and I was like, my mom doesn't love me. Like it was horrible. It was
I
like,
bet.
I was like,
I'm s
I was ranging from like laughing really hard to like
Yeah.
crying really hard, but it was
Emotions are
relieving.
just pouring. Yeah,
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 because the thing is, I had never pushed her that far before because I was always so worried that she would prove to me that she didn't love me. And I was finally
right.
willing to have her prove that to me. So I said the
Yeah,
thing I needed, and the response back was no. And I
mm,
was like, okay, I see it. I allowed myself
yeah,
to see it, and it was just the end. But yeah, it is.
yeah.
I still sometimes will think about it and just be like, I just want
Of
to be loved.
course. Of course, and that
Yeah.
happens. I mean, I think I I I do therapy every other week, and I think I've got everything together. I'm halfway through the session, I'm already crying. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
yeah.
Because
Yeah.
and
Or arguing
I'll
with your
literally
therapist. Yeah.
and I'll be like, and then she'll ask me, "Is this an old feeling or is this a
Mm,
new feeling?" And I'll be like, "Oh,
yeah.
it's an old feeling. So this belongs to a younger version of yourself." And I'm like, "Yeah, I think so." And
Yeah.
it's just these emotions that we bottled for a long time and that we try to jam in there. And then I always talk about it. I know everyone's tired of hearing it, but the idea that like I learned that trauma, especially like intense trauma or severe trauma, push it down and we store it in a certain place, but then we take the next trauma and we put it in that same place. So
Yeah.
before you know it, you've got, say, if they're all different balls of yarn, now they've intermingled. So I got shot and I'm dealing with PTSD from getting
Yeah.
shot. And then all of a sudden I've got this memory coming up from 30 years ago that I've
Oh, yeah.
never shared with. So it's like, what am I supposed to do here?
Yeah.
I don't want to deal with all this, but all these emotions come pouring out. I even had a weird it's kind of an interesting thing that happened in the last couple months. I don't know how it happened. I must have felt the feels enough or something like that. But I suddenly realized I wasn't running on resentments. And I'm telling you, everything around my day was run on a resentment. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't want to work out. It's like, yeah, you're working out. You're going to jam it down their throat. You know what I mean? And it's just like,
Yeah.
no, like that sort of stuff. And I was just running on resentments. And somehow I was able to let them go. And I thought my always assumption is like when these resentments finally, if I'm finally able to let them go, I'm going to live in peace. But what actually happened, it's like that my if my head was a room, it emptied out of resentments, and then all
Mm.
the emotions that were waiting at the door to follow those resentments came
Yeah.
flooding in, and it
Yeah,
was
totally.
it, it was like happy, sad, crying, laughing, like this whole weird, and you think you're insane, like you talked about earlier. You're like, "What is
Yeah.
wrong with
What
me?"
is
But
this?
when
Yeah. And you
and
don't know
sometimes you
how
just
to, like, know what they are either. Like, for me, like, I don't know, I feel like sometimes people think that, like, emotional literacy or, like, emotional intelligence is something you just have and that's it, but I think you could
Mhm.
grow it. And when I first started doing this, like, I would feel bad, but it's like, is that bad guilt or is that bad, like, sad or is that bad, like, I don't know, like, shame,
Yeah,
like, it was
yeah.
all mixed together. So, like you said, like, the resentments go. I had the same thing where I was just, like, so hard done by all the time, and then that was gone, and then I was like, "Okay, I'm feeling something. What is this thing I'm feeling?" Like, I had to, because I do, like, somatic work, I, like, kind of focus and I try to describe the feeling, so even if I don't know the word, I'll be like, "Oh, it kind of feels like I'm stepping on a big prickly ball and there's nowhere for me to get off of." And then I'm like, "Wait, what emotion is that?" Like, trying to like figure it out, but it's hard because sometimes you don't know, and
Right.
sometimes it's like 6 emotions and you're like, "Okay, which one is it?" Like I used to always default to the negative emotion, and then sometimes by doing that work, I'll be like, "Oh, I'm feeling fear and excitement," but it's like actually 20% fear, 80% excitement. But if I didn't
Right.
unpick it, I would just see it as bleh, like
That's
just bad.
that's really interesting because for a long period of time, I thought I was just running on anxiety, anxiety and
Yeah.
fear and whatever, especially after I got shot. And it felt like it never went away until I realized I was like, what if this isn't fear? What if this is excitement?
Yeah.
I'm like, because those things are pretty close to
They're
one another.
linked. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's actually happening here? And I actually did a little bit of like, for whatever reason, after I got shot, I developed a fear of heights. Like I literally thought I was going to like throw
Huh.
myself off a building.
Ugh.
So
Yeah.
the way we handled that is eventually, I my wife told me we were in London actually. We were in London and we were there for Christmas, probably maybe like 5 years ago. We stayed downtown London with my mom, my dad, my sister, her husband, and whatever. And Kate's like, "What do you want to do today?" I go, "I want to climb the tallest or go up in the highest building
Yeah.
and look straight down. And what building is that in
Just
London?
force yourself to do it.
Is the Shard. So the
Yeah.
Shard is all glass at the top, and it's an
Yeah, I've heard.
opening. And so I like get out of the elevator. If it were up to me, I just would have gone around the elevator and down the next elevator. But like we
Mhm.
slowly got to the edge. And before I knew it, fear had turned into excitement. And I was like throwing
Mm,
myself against the glass and stuff,
that's
to the
great.
point, if you've ever been up there, the restrooms that they have at the Shard, actually, there's a floor to ceiling window next to the stall.
Oh,
And
damn.
so I went
I've
from
never been.
almost crawling off the elevator to now peeing next to an open like window looking straight
Yeah,
down. Like,
that's
how
terrifying.
crazy is that? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So it's just so funny when you face something that you think you're afraid of, that
Mm.
and you don't die, it like reprograms your brain. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, we were
Yes.
forecasting wrong. You know, like
Yes,
that.
exactly. It's like, oh, it
Yeah.
was over my trauma response, my amygdala or whatever, it was overactive, and actually this stimulus is fine. It's funny
Yeah.
because like the smaller we let our worlds become and the more like controlled by fear and like pushing things away, the like more scared and anxious and fearful, like, that's how we end up being, because the
Yeah. It's,
stimulus, the bar for it is like so low. Anything can
yeah.
happen and it's scary and stressful. But the
Yep.
more you face your fears and like do public speaking or go to the top of the Shard or whatever it is, like tell your mom what you really think, whatever it is, like your world gets bigger and you're like, oh, I have more space all of a sudden. Like,
Yeah.
it's actually not so scary. Like, I did the thing and, like, nothing happened, you know?
You literally think for a long time that if this thing happens, like your trauma response is like, there's potential I might die. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's like, it's that extreme. Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to die. So I have to be
Mhm.
small. I have to be on alert. I turned into like a dog who had been abused in a room. That dog would find a corner, you know what I mean? And say, this is my corner. And even if you were trying to feed it or pet it, it was going to bite you. Like I became that
Yeah.
person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's so isolating, and
Yeah.
it's actually, it's not a good feeling to be that scared and be in a corner, you know,
No.
where you're like, and you feel like you can't trust anything, you know, even
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. And you can't really
um
relate to anyone either, because, like, you're always looking
no.
for signs of danger instead of just, like, having a conversation.
Right. Yeah, very true.
Yeah, it's
Great,
crazy.
great stuff, Allie. Awesome. Well, you've definitely explained your shit creek. We've talked about the
Yes.
paddles, that
Oh, yeah,
being
I didn't even
therapy.
tell you what they were, but yeah, that's what they were.
No, you did. Yeah, you went
I
into
just didn't say
therapy
paddles.
and doing the work. I think that's the main thing, is like, it
Yeah.
sucks when you get to the brink of it. You're like, now I have to start doing all this work, but it's literally your key to the next level. And it's not going to be comfy,
Yeah.
but you're going to keep moving down. And it's almost like like you said, your world grows, your view grows. You go from
Yeah.
very tunnel vision to like, you're able to see different things. And then before you know it, you could be looking at the same topic that you've been so isolated on for years, seeing it one way, and something happens and your perspective just shifts just a little. And
Yeah.
you're like, I never saw it that way.
Mhm.
If I didn't see it that way, are there other ways I'm not seeing it? And you go on like almost like a personal quest for
Yeah.
yourself. And you're
Yeah.
like, oh, and before you know it, you're the one walking around being like, did you know this? Did you know that? And like, you're talking to everyone about it. And like, this
Yeah,
is
and it's like
happy.
it's always on your mind, yeah.
Yeah. You're like, this is so cool. And everyone's like,
Yeah.
I know, we talked about it last time.
Yeah.
But
And
yeah,
then you make a podcast about it so you can keep talking about it.
exactly.
Yeah.
And how many people are gonna hear it and be helped? It's amazing. But I gotta ask you, the last
Yeah.
question is, what would you say to a person who is currently stuck in their own shit creek? Maybe a couple words of hope.
Hmm, what would I say? I honestly, I think it's that I think it's a couple of things. The first thing is, like I said earlier, self-love is learned, not earned. So if you in your shit creek feel like you're not good enough, or life's never going to change, or you just don't deserve to be happy and you don't even know what that would look like, learning to love yourself will help. Whatever
Mm.
situation you're in, it will help, because then you will have a friend with you all the time who wants the best for you and will help you realize what you actually want out of life. I think
Yeah.
self-love is so underrated, and it is the biggest tool that we have. Even if you're in an abusive relationship where you feel like there's no escape, if you can learn to love yourself, then you can know when those horrible words are hitting you or whatever is happening is coming your way. You know that you can trust yourself, or you can depend on yourself for support. You can love yourself. You can comfort yourself. I really think that that is the biggest thing. And I think, depends on what shit creek you're in, but like for me and people like me with abusive relationships, I also think it's really important, even if you don't know how to love yourself, try to accept yourself, or at least try to get in touch with what you're feeling. What you're feeling, what you actually think about the situation. When you're with that person, how does it make yourself feel? Because the more you focus on the relationship or the other person, the less you know who you are, the more you lose sight of who you are. And it's not possible to have the life you're looking for when you don't even have sight of yourself. So focus on yourself, focus on, what's going on for you, get to know yourself, get to accept yourself, get to love yourself. That's the path.
Yeah.
That's what I'd say.
Well said.
Yeah.
So hard
and
to
you're
do.
worthy of it. You're worthy of it.
Yes.
Like, listen
Yes,
to
you
me.
are.
You are. Yeah.
I love it, Allie. Thank you so
Cool.
much. It's been such a pleasure, such a blessing. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on. It was lovely talking to you.
Of course. Absolute pleasure. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Shit Creek Survivors. If Allie's story resonated with you, or if you know someone who's struggling with narcissistic abuse, share this episode. It could be their first step towards healing. And to stay connected, visit shitcreeksurvivors.com, email shitcreeksurvivorspodcast@gmail.com, follow us on YouTube and Facebook. And if you enjoyed this episode, subscribe, leave a review, and share. It really helps us reach more people navigating their own shit creek. Until next time, keep paddling.